And I think what I realized at a young age is I always thought it would just be like, you're a high schooler and you're in college and you might drink, but then you're an adult and then you're responsible and then it just goes away and there's no such thing as alcoholism. And it's like, no, that can last your whole life if that's the path you choose.
Welcoming to Knockin Doorz Down, the host of the Bright Side of Life podcast, Melissa Bright. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm a fan of your work. I got a lot of stuff to dig into, but I really want to start with an area that I know that you like to point out as well as I do, the necessity of resilience. I want to start there and then we'll kind of give people some backstory, but how do you view resilience with everything that you've been through? Because it's a lot of trauma. It's a lot of healing.
Yeah. So I recently just did an article on resilience, and it's so weird because I'm in such a weird headspace now. So I'm going to be totally upfront and honest. Like these past 2 months, I've been in like this weird funk of really lacking like physical energy, like super tired, chronic fatigue, that kind of stuff. So when you ask that question now, when we all think of resilience, it's like getting knocked down and then getting back up again. And this knockdown can take a day where you just had a crappy day and you get back up to years. But I think the most important part, and where I always find the most important part of resiliency is choosing to always get back up despite whatever we have went through, whatever we have been faced with. And sometimes the same exact situation, the same exact trauma, the same exact thing can knock you down several times. You know, mine recently, in terms of like when I lost my mom 11 years ago, that hasn't affected me until 2020 majorly. And then I was fine. And then this year it's all over again. And I'm like, it's just like ebbs and flows, which just proves to me that like a healing journey is obviously not linear. You can go back and forth. You can have your great days and you can have your struggling days. But it's important to know that like you have people in your corner and that you can get back up and you can rise again and fight. And
I agree. I think a lot of people, and I don't know if we're sold on it because we all definitely get our Hollywood movie stories where it's, challenge, resilience, ends with a nice button, and life just doesn't work that way, especially when it comes to love. Because I was going to ask you, what do you think had brought you down? A lot of people, I think, are feeling that right now, don't you? I think we're just in a weird time.
We're in a weird time, but this is what is so, well, I can tell you what mine is, and I'm going to be completely honest with you and your whole audience. So, and I know you just talked to Tim McCarthy about him taking medicine, you taking medicine. And last year in April, I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, which is no surprise. I've suffered from debilitating anxiety since my mom passed away 10 years ago. So they put me on, oh my God, what did they put me on? I can't even remember. Let's say, I think Prozac it was.
Oh,
well, I think that's what it was. Now I can't remember. Anyways, I know that it says causes drowsiness. Mine was immediately chronic fatigue. Like I felt I had been awake for days on this medicine. And I'm like, I don't think I can do this. Like, cool, my anxiety's not here, but I feel like I've been awake for 4 days. And I'm like, this has only happened since I've started this medicine. So then I started taking Kratom. I don't know if you're familiar with Kratom.
I've heard about it.
Okay. Well, it's like it's natural. And I'm going to freaking butcher this and people are probably yelling and stuff. But for me, it's made me speed and gave me energy.
Sure.
But then followed by speeding, then you would have like this crash.
Right.
Well, I was taking it all the time. So just highs and lows, highs and lows, highs and lows, highs and lows. And then I realized that that was giving me really bad fatigue. So I was trying to get off of this like the past month, and the withdrawals were oh so not fun.
Oh,
And that's where it really, really put me in a really depressed spot, because I am such like a go-getter. And so to have my physical energy already in question, and then I'm trying to get off of this, it was just like this. I mean, people go through this much longer, but mine was like 3 weeks of having no energy. And I'm like, am I ever going to feel normal again? So I'm coming off of that, but I'm still having a little bit of the chronic fatigue, which is like still messing with me. And like, I've never had any health issues like this. And for people listening, and you, if you've ever had like health issues that are physical, those can mess with your mind very quickly, also on top of the mental stuff we have going on.
oh God, absolutely. I've had a separated shoulder and no doctor will listen to me or anything else. And now I'm in a place that I can't afford it anyway. And so, yeah, sometimes when it's acting up and it hunches me over, it's weird because it destroys my posture. And at 6'3" and I'm hunched over, there's something about it psychologically, in addition to the pain, and a guy that, you know, it's kind of hard to get me to take Tylenol anymore.
Right.
You know,
Right.
it does. It just, there's no other word. It fucks with your head. And,
Yep.
you know, you just are, you're worn out. I wake up because I'm in pain. I haven't slept well. So I know what you're talking about. And it's just like, how do I get, where's the resilience in this? Is it the acceptance? Here's life as is. This is now your base level, or
Right.
you know, yeah. And it's just like, this is not the base level I want in my daily life.
No, it is not. And that's where I like, oh my God. And my mom already struggled with chronic fatigue because she had fibromyalgia, but I wasn't aware of this as a young kid. I don't know what's going on with my mom. Like,
Sure.
okay, she has this stuff going on, but that's not really like resonating with me. So it's just been like scary. And then this is the month that my mom died. It's like a whole thing. There's like several layers to like this funk that I've been in, that I've been trying desperately to pull myself out of. But there's also like the shame that has came with it, because of I've been on such this amazing healing journey, and I'm like pro mental health, like, oh my God, you got to have self-love. And then now I'm like trying to pull out all the tools that normally work for me, and I'm like, nothing's working. So then the question kept becoming like, well, then am I just supposed to be here? Right. You just said that, like, maybe this is where we're supposed to be for a minute until we figure out something else. So I'm very like introspective in terms of always asking, like, why am I feeling this way? What's making, where is this happening? And like, I have some answers. And so the biggest answer was totally getting off of Kratom, and that's been a bitch.
Yeah, a lot of stuff scares me now. It took a lot for the doctor to convince me. I know you don't want an SSRI. Let's try Wellbutrin. This is something, even with seasonal, you can take, you can get up, you know. So I was like, oh, okay, doc. But you know what? I try to, and I see it with my kids, both in music lessons and myself, like when I was learning to play guitar and bass and this stuff, is that you kind of get these points and you're like, I'm not expanding anywhere. But there's something weird that can happen with us, that if you just stick with it, that things kind of become a little more clear. And I have to remind myself of that. It's I was an avid basketball player in high school and the first couple of years at college. And it's weird, you know, 20 something years later, the game all of a sudden makes more sense to me. And it's weird how our brains and life present us these things. And it's, you know, sometimes we do have to sit, meditate, pray, breathe through it, hit some kind of a meeting, talk with someone, you know, just for that day. I think where that one day at a time thing works really for everybody.
It really does. It really does. And I totally, well, we'll talk more about it, but I have several family members. My mom was in recovery for 14 years before she passed away. I used to go to meetings all the time as a little kid. Loved it.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's something that I hadn't picked up on. So I know you talk about your mom.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little more childhood. Were mom and dad together, separated, divorced?
Yeah. So they were married until I was in kindergarten, and then they divorced. And it was me and my brother. So then my brother naturally went with my dad, and I stayed with my mom primarily. Lived with my dad one time for a very, very short span. And just wanted to be back with my mom just because I'm a woman and she's a girl. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds better. Uh, but she had severe trauma in her life and she was a nurse, and she was stealing medication, prescription drugs. This is when we were in Portland, and I was in third grade, and she got caught, and they gave her an ultimatum. They said, you either get sober or we're going to pull your nursing license. And I think that obviously was a thing that scared the shit out of my mom. And she got sober after that. From the time I was in third grade until she passed away, she relapsed twice. One was literally on margarita, and one was on beer. She was she was scared to get married again, and she relapsed on that. But yeah, so I really wasn't around alcohol that much after third grade. I was always around in the program, going to AA dances and the whole shebang.
So you learned how to party sober at a young age.
Yeah, exactly.
Did that really, it's weird for me because, my dad in recovery over 20 years sober, but oddly, even in high school, when people were getting messed up and stuff like that at parties, I still the guy that got people home, was sober and stuff like that. So it's still odd to me that I didn't hit meetings with my dad. We didn't really talk about it even after his stints in Betty Ford and things like that. So did you ever find yourself gravitating towards that area, or is it something where you're just like, I saw this pattern with my mom, not for me?
Oh no, I definitely drink. um but I never, to this day, I do not remember my mom's alcohol abuse. I do not remember her drug abuse. I always saw my mom, she was an extremely hard worker. So I never remember her being drunk. I never remember her being messed up on pills or anything. Maybe she didn't even do that stuff around me. Maybe she just went to the bars. I know she went to the bars, but there was something definitely instilled with me. Once she did get in AA, there was those people are bad, Melissa. Don't drink, because those people, she wouldn't say that. It was just almost implied. And I think what I realized at a young age is I always thought it would just be you're a high schooler and you're in college and you might drink, but then you're an adult and then you're responsible and then it just goes away and there's no such thing as alcoholism. And it's no, that can last your whole life if that's the path you choose. So I've asked myself for a long time if alcohol, I get really bad anxiety after drinking alcohol the next day. And I'm always is this some conscious thing that I feel guilty for drinking? And but my mom knew. I mean, my mom died when I was 25. She knew I was drinking.
Sure.
But I'm always do I feel guilty because my mom would say don't drink? But she never said that to me. She wanted me to have my own path. She wanted me to be responsible. But she was not don't drink. She would never say that to me.
And I think it's an imperative thing. I know I do that now with people, and even my dad was that way. He knew I had a problem, but he's just always, son, I'm here if you need to talk. And I think that's the best way we can approach anyone. We can't force them into whatever it is to open up about anything.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And at that point, I mean, I was 25, so I was I was young and I was working at a vodka bar, so I was drinking a lot. I don't think that it's ever been a huge problem. I've quit on for months and it hasn't pills have never been an issue for me at all. That shit has always scared me. And I'm I'm good on that. No, thank you. But I do think to some extent, my brother and I have addictive personalities. for sure.
Yeah, I see it. My brother's never struggled with substances that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, definitely that hardworking, overly deep dive into stuff. I still have trouble shutting off at times. I'm sitting in bed with a girlfriend last night. My daughter's here on the bed, and I'm like, here I am going through my phone and email for work things. And it's like, I literally got still working. Yeah. And I just put the phone down at that. It didn't need to be. You need to put that down. It's like,
Right.
be present, be in the moment. That's some tough shit for me still.
Yeah. Oh, I realized a long time ago that me sitting still was like, I'm not doing, um, I'm not being productive. And like, I will tell you, my dad's voice is in the back of my head more than anybody's at all. He was so hard on me and my brother when we were little, of nothing was ever good enough. We couldn't freaking pick up firewood good enough. We couldn't sweep the floor good enough. We couldn't, like, he would tell me not to drink coffee because it was going to stunt my growth. I'm 6 feet. I was fine there. It was just everything. He was on us about everything. And that just continued on. Like, he wanted me to be the star basketball player. I was not. Wanted me to be a nurse. Did not want to do that. So like all these things, and I was like, oh, I think I disappointed my dad. Then I got pregnant at 16, really probably disappointed him. So he's always in my head of like, you can do better. You can be better. You need to do this, suck it up, like all this stuff. And unfortunately that I didn't put that there.
Yep.
Like he put that there. And sometimes I feel like I'll get off my soapbox in a minute, but like parents don't realize the damage that they're doing, because I get so hard on myself, extremely hard on myself. And I literally said in the car yesterday, I'm like, I did not do this shit to me. I did not. No, this came from somewhere. And I know it was my dad.
No, you're absolutely right. Because I was going to ask you about that before you alluded to becoming a mom at 16, was how that affected you with relationships and, you know, seeking out a partner. It's a big factor. It is.
Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, me having my daughter at 16 was the greatest blessing ever in my life. And I say that for so many reasons. One, she's 20 years old and she is my absolute best friend. Everybody thinks we're sisters, which is great for me. But my mom got to have a grandchild for 10 years before she passed away. And she was with my parents every weekend, because that's when I was working, because I was in school, high school and college. That was a blessing in itself. As far as relationships, I truthfully didn't have a lot of relationships in my 20s. It was not something I was affected by. It was not something that I really sought out. I was doing my own thing. I had one serious boyfriend like in my 20s, not for very long. And until I met this boyfriend, who it was perfect because we're same age. We've already known each other from high school. He has a kid around the same age as my daughter. So we were on the same path. Yeah. Because I even asked myself, I'm like, at this point, I haven't been married yet. I'm going to have a guy that already has kids, because I don't necessarily want any more kids. My daughter's at this point was like 16, 17 before I dated my boyfriend now. So it wasn't that hard. I just stayed single and just talked to guys, but I was never seeking out like, oh, I want to be in a relationship with him. I want to be in a relationship with him. So I didn't bring too many guys into her life. Thank God.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I tried to be pretty discretionary myself after my divorce, but it sounds to me though, you inherently understood a thing that I think a lot of people struggle with. And I definitely did. I openly talk about my sex and love addiction, more the love part. And, you know, sex was a part of it too. But is it thinking somebody else and their validation and everything else was going to make me whole? And it really took to working my sobriety to go, there's no outside solution to these inside problems. Nobody's going to complete me but me.
Yeah. And it's a weird thing that you say that, because I was fine single. Like I didn't want to say I prided myself on like not having boyfriends, because if the right person would have came along at that time, I would not have like pushed them away.
Sure.
I just was never one of those girls that had to have a boyfriend to feel complete. And I do pride myself on that. However, now that I've been with somebody for almost 6 years, so much shit has came out that I've learned about myself that I did not learn when I was single. Like a lot of my traumas from like my dad and all this stuff that like makes me lash out at my boyfriend and have anger issues and insecurity issues. And I'm like, oh, this is where all this stuff was. I just didn't see it because I wasn't in a relationship.
All right, Melissa, do share. What are we struggling with here? I know you do coaching. I'm gonna help you out.
What do the biggest thing, I take offense to everything. Oh. And I will preface this by saying that my boyfriend is not disrespectful in terms of like, he does not name call. He does not say, why did you not cook this? Why did you not do it this way? So that just shows that I'm just like super sensitive in terms of that, because everything I did for my dad as a kid was just, nothing was ever right. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to Brandon, even if he's like, oh, did you happen to get milk at the store? I'm like, well, no, you didn't ask me for milk, because I'm like, oh my God, I just disappointed him. He's going to want to leave me because I didn't get him milk. It's like, that's how deep it goes. It's not him being an asshole. And I'm like, I'm just sensitive. Yeah. It's the disappointing people is my biggest issue.
And thus it snowballs into that immediate thought of fear of abandonment. I can relate.
100%. And then attachment issues also, because I have fear of abandonment in 2 layers. First layer is my dad left. Well, they divorced, but then my dad was never actively in my life for the rest of his life. Mm-hmm. And then so then my mom passed away when I was 25, and then my dad just died last year. So by the age of 35, I had no parents left. Yeah. So fear of abandonment is like totally real in my life, which they obviously didn't choose to leave this world, but I still can't help how I feel. Like, I am sad I don't have parents still here. Oh yeah, it's total fear of abandonment. And he has never given me a reason to make me think that this is shit in my head that I just keep, oh God, he's going to leave me because of this, because I'm not this, or I'm too much that, or that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the stories that we, like you said, wasn't your voice. It's that other voice. And there is no doubt that we get that shit put in our head when we are a kid. It just happens. You know, I mean, I can just relate to you and empathize. My dad was overly critical because he was overly critical of himself, that came from people that were overly critical. Yes. And nothing was ever good enough. As much as I loved and adore my paternal grandma, it just, the day she died, nothing was ever good enough or right. And my dad carried that brunt and burden of never being enough and good enough. And, so what kind of work do you do, or maybe some tools that you could share that communicating with Brandon, your boyfriend, on, letting him know and making amends, like this is me, this is not you. And
yeah. So the one thing I'll say is we called it quits 2 years into our relationship. And I'm so glad that we got back together, because there was just stuff that we both didn't want to see. And finally we were like, maybe we should have a conversation. And one of the biggest things that helped me, that I will admit to, is he would call me on my bullshit a lot of times. Yeah. Maybe he was not so aware, like, Melissa's yelling at me because she has daddy issues, but he was aware, like, she's having a bad day and this actually has nothing to do with Brandon. And I'm going to let her know that, like, hey, whatever you have going on, this is not me. Slowly but surely, I started to realize, like, yeah, this has nothing to do with Brandon at all. And then as time progressed, it really was he would just call me out. And then it was really understanding, once I started going on my healing journey in 2020, I realized so much of this is my past trauma and how I was raised as a child. And it's really not him. So in terms of tools, if somebody calls you out on something, and he has always been respectful in that terms, maybe just say like, hey, is there some truth to this? I know it's not easy admitting, like, when somebody said, like, somebody calls you out because you just want to get defensive and you're like, no, fuck you. Like, no, but maybe there is truth to it. And I literally did have to look inside and be like, yeah, that's not the case here. Not saying not saying he's perfect and he messes up too. The biggest tool is becoming aware and just looking inside and being like, okay, what is this true? And unfortunately for him, like, people just think that girls can't be the one that is like mean or rude or angry. They like, I guess sometimes people just think it's just guys that can be dicks. And I'm like, no, we can be angry and we have our own stuff, you know? My biggest tip would be become aware and asking yourself, like, where is this coming from? I heard something recently, like, don't ask yourself why this is happening, because then you'll just tell yourself a story and we already know the story. Like, for example, why is this happening? Well, it's happening because I have childhood trauma from my dad always being hard on me, but that just keeps me in a loop and just keeps me believing the story instead of actually doing something about it. Well, how could you react better next time? Or how can you notice this trigger faster where you don't take it out on your boyfriend and you recognize it and stop that behavior pattern, thought, belief, whatever, quicker?
Well, I thank you for sharing that, because I think it sits people in the victim mentality, which is the worst place to be, because yes, as a child, we are a victim of these things. Abusive talk to a child, it's child abuse. It's a form of child abuse. It just is. Right. Anything less than loving is. And so that's the hard part when we become an adult, especially with the intimacy you have to build in a trusting relationship to be able to trust the other person. And like you said, sounds like Brandon does it with couth and compassion. Yeah. And, he's not like, look here, bitch, it's like, he's just like, it's so important to shed that victim mentality. And I think once you can, our mind opens up to really hearing that other person. Like I shared before we started recording, sitting there working on the cell phone, girlfriend, they're talking in our room and I'm next to them. And then it's like still working. It's like, it wasn't a rude question. It wasn't a stop doing that. It was simply a polite question. And it was that reminder, because I've shared, help me be in the moment more, because I get obsessed with work and I let these moments pass that are fleeting quickly. Like you said, your daughter's 20. I got a 14-year-old son, a soon to be 13-year-old daughter. And it's like, how did I get here already?
Yeah, that's exactly it. That is exactly it. And having that person, I mean, I've learned so much with being in the relationship with him and how I react to people. It has taught me a lot, and then not freaking out on him.
I hope more of these conversations are happening around, because we really have to break that Hollywood mentality of how the relationship goes. And if there isn't a ton of friction and crazy passion and all these things, like, no, all that stuff's activating your nervous system. It's snorting people. It's no different than popping a pill, putting something up your nose, pounding 20 beers, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I've had my own issues with, like, I'm a Leo, as are you. So I'm like a lover through and through. My boyfriend is not the most affectionate person. And forever, I always criticized him for that. And I made him feel bad for that, but like in ways that, like, you don't touch me, so then you must not like me, where he was not raised in a affectionate household. And that in turn like would mess with me, where now I have this awareness that not everybody grows up in this like I mean, I'm not saying we were always hugging, but clearly I'm affectionate, so my parents did something right to that regard. But did his parents do something wrong, or maybe they weren't brought up giving hugs and stuff like that? I'm going on a tangent and I forgot my thought process here. But just realizing that we all come from different paths and we're all working with each other.
Yeah.
And that not everything has to be movie and Hollywood related, or just being okay in a moment that doesn't have to be so grand. And that's
Yeah.
where I sometimes struggle.
Me too. And it's not anything that Cassandra does or doesn't do. I have to really catch myself that these are my thoughts. This is my stuff. This is my thing. You know, you know, I mean, the kids are with us all the time, which is great. It's not a complaint, but it doesn't really lend along with our budget right now as everything gets more and more expensive. Doesn't really lend to getting a romantic date on the coast and staying at a, you know, and all these things that I keep telling myself, well, boy, I better do and let her know and let her know she's valid in this relationship and all these things. And it's like, this is a shit that's up in my head. It's the stuff that I repeated with that love addiction part, that I was showing the other person all these wonderful things, going to all the concerts or whatever. And the reality behind it all was I'm sitting quietly stressed out because my credit card bills are going up. My debt is rising. My stress level to keep up this story is ever building. And it just is, it's exhausting.
It is exhausting. It is so exhausting. And something my boyfriend has told me over and over, like I have this picture of him in my head that is just like such a jerk, because my biggest fear, I told you, is fear of abandonment. So I'm scared that one day how do I explain this? Do you know about attachment issues?
Yes.
And so apparently with attachment issues, depending on the type, or maybe all of them, I don't know, like you think that there is something inside you that like, if the world finds out, they're just going to like up and leave you, or your friends or your boyfriend, or they're just gonna be like, what but it's like, there's nothing really inside of you. You just think there is. And so that is like always plaguing me, but he's like, he'll do something and I just freak out. And he's like, you have this picture in my head that I'm going to do this or react this way. And it's not true. And that is just stories in my head that I think I'm deserving of him to act the other way. Like, well, why would he not stay out till 3 a.m. with his friends? Well, no, he won't. He'll actually come home at a decent time. I just think this because that's what I think I'm deserving of.
No, I went through it many a times, Melissa. I guess I could share this story. I'm not naming names, but I'm going to go to this concert with my buddies, in the concert, you know, big rock concert. And then the story is played out. Well, you're going to come home or you're not going to come home at all. Cause of course there's going to be a woman there because of who you are. And then they're going to come up to you and you're going to be vulnerable to, you know, and it's like this whole thing. I just ended up, for me, sadly, just shutting down and just being like, I don't go anywhere. I don't do anything. And I know, you know, both sides really do this to each other. They can, men, women, I don't care, whatever your relationship status, you know, if you're in a non-binary, people can just do this to each other in relationships because of the stories we tell ourselves with that fear of abandonment. And it sucks because the only way to build trust is to trust.
That sucks.
Right? It's all we can do is, okay, Brandon, you're gonna go and have some drinks with your buddies and you'll be home around midnight,
right?
And the only way you can let him prove it, and that his word matters, integrity, which people confuse integrity and morality and all these things all the time. No, integrity is that word and following through and doing it, you know, or whatever it is. And it's hard. It's hard, you know. I've had it where the girlfriend's like, I'm going to go visit my parents. And because of my traumas in relationships, it's like, is she really going to see her parents? She's been gone for like 7 hours, you know? And it's like, how stupid is that? That, you know, it's like,
Oh,
I get the text message, here, safe at my folks, let you know when I'm coming home. Okay. And I just have to sit in that mode of trust,
yeah.
you know, but, and she's never done anything.
Right? Oh, that's what makes Brandon the most mad. It's because he's never done anything to be mistrusting, but yet that's why he's like, you paint me as this picture, but I've never done anything. Like,
Right.
never have I done anything for you to mistrust me, but yet it's like I'm guilty before I've even like have walked out the door or something. Um, yeah, it's just being scared that he's gonna leave me. But
Right.
it's weird because it's not the normal stuff. Like I'm not like, you're gonna go cheat on me, you're gonna go do this. Cause I've had my own issues of being worried he was just gonna die because I've lost a lot of people that I love.
Sure.
And I'm like, oh my God. So it's not as crazy as it's not like always like this big blowout thing, like you're gonna do something. But then sometimes it can be in my head. I'm like, oh God, what's gonna happen?
Well, and it's so tough when it's the weird nuances of love, right? That
Mm,
I know I can play out those stories too, because just like that, you know, then it's like, oh my gosh, it's been 5 or 6 hours. Is she safe? Like it
right.
immediately turns says she's safe. Like, you know, I just adore this person and what we're building together. And you know, and I get off into that area as well. My
Yeah.
mind runs, and poor lady. But I've done a better job of having it calm and cool, and not the 9 million text messages. Although I was never overly that guy, but it goes there,
Yeah. Even if it's in your head, it'll drive you freaking nuts.
right? Or when they do come home, you're completely shut down, and it's, I'm glad you're home. Are you really?
Oh,
Because
oh,
you're acting like a little shit, you know. So, you know, I gotta catch that. I gotta get, you know, like immediately, instead of that is, how are your folks? How was, you know, how was it? Did the check-in instead, you know? And it's hard to flip from the mindset of me to how was your experience, you know?
oh, F. That this just happened to me and him. This just happened. I'm going to share the story really quick. We have great friends that live in our neighborhood that we just recently became friends with in the last year, and they hang out a lot. He teaches Brandon guitar. He's like an amazing guitarist, bassist in St. Louis. And they went to go bring over some of our food that we had for dinner to one of the band members that's literally 30 seconds away. Well, that 10-minute ride turned into 2 hours. And I wound up just like coming home, and Brandon walked in the door and I'm in bed, and he just came to try to immediately give me a hug and kiss me. And he's like, babe, I am so sorry. And I just was like, I literally shut down, and I was like, I did not even say anything. I didn't even say, are you? And then he was like, fuck you. He's like, I literally am sorry. Um, and he had already texted me and told me like, hey, these like they're talking, they won't shut up. Like, I'm trying to get out of here. And he tried to apologize, and I wasn't having it. And that was totally not the right response. I should not have been that way. I should have been like, babe, I get it. And yeah, that's a
how'd you
whole thing.
how'd you make amends?
Mm. Well, the next he didn't even sleep in the room that night. He was like, I
Oh,
literally did nothing wrong. He's like, I was in communication with you. And he totally was. Um, I just saw it in my head differently. Like, you could speak up and tell your friends you could go and whatever. But we had that conversation, and he literally said, babe, this is the first time this has ever happened. He's like, but you always literally just want to execute me the very first time that something's happened. And
right.
like I said, this has not happened a lot. So the first time I'm just like, oh, it's over. Like, he doesn't respect me. He doesn't care. He doesn't whatever. And it's not true.
Yeah, it becomes a control factor, don't you think? Or at least from
Yes.
my experience, it
Yes.
totally becomes one. And again, it's looking for that outside solution to our internal problems.
It was totally about control, because it wasn't like he literally, when I texted him, I said, "Where are you?" He took a picture of, he's like, "Look, they're literally FaceTiming with their other bandmate. I'm here. I'm trying to get out." And it totally was about control. And it's just, it all goes back to, am I just going to be forgotten about? Am I just going to be forgotten about?
Right. And we even play it out too. I don't know about you. I've done this. I've not ended many relationships, but when I did, it's like, see, I'm the one that had the power. I'm the one that ended it.
Okay. So tell me if I can shut down really quick in terms of like, if we were to end it, then I'm like all of a sudden okay, because it's like, okay, now I have to go in the survival mode again. I'm probably not explaining it very well.
No, you are.
But it's like Leos are just naturally like, once it's done, we're just like, fine, okay, never mind. But I also think it's a like defense mechanism too.
Yeah. Well, we pride ourselves in loyalty.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But yeah, total defense mechanism. Yep. See, everything that I told myself would be true is true. I'm the one that's taking control of it. I'm in charge of my life. And it's ridiculous because there's, certainty's great. Uncertainty's necessary. We have to accept all these things and kind of at times take our hands off the wheel and enjoy the ride.
I know. Freaking A.
I don't even know who Brandon is, and I love him already.
He's a good guy.
Yeah. You tell him that?
Yeah, I do.
Good.
I do. Probably not enough.
Yeah. It's one of the things where have you ever had people when you try to talk to them and, we'll say Susie, Miss X, whatever it is. And they're talking about that, their partner, whatever. And it's like, well, do you tell them that? And they go, well, they know. No, they fucking don't know. They don't know unless you tell them.
Yeah.
And better yet, show them.
Right. And that's where, yeah, I don't think I tell them enough, because this is where I think my affection is enough, where he's never said it's not. He's never not like, oh, you need to do this more. But I feel like there's also ways that I know that he would prefer to be shown that I love him. Like I think I do truthfully believe his love language is like acts of service, where mine is affection. And it's like, how do we like show each other certain things? But this man will buy me a gift every single time that he literally goes to the store. I don't care if it's a candle, a bottle of wine. He bought me and my daughter these stupid, like not stupid, keychain chargers. He's just always thinking of me whenever like he's at the store. That's his love language. Gifts upon gifts upon gifts. And I have to recognize that like, this is how he shows me he loves me.
Yeah. Our
love languages are not the same. But Melissa, look at everything he's done for you.
And that's a real challenge when we have someone that's different. I'm a big touch and affirmation person. I like good one-on-one, vulnerable conversations. And so, you have somebody that's the same way. Hey, great, cool. If you don't, then you do have to do that work and go, like, did I really need this? But then you have to, like you said, look at the overall arch of the person that, wow, this is him. Like you said, he's out and about and he's always thinking about me,
Right.
So,
right. That's what, as they say, relationships are hard.
Yes. Life is hard.
And right. All the above, making everything work.
I want to ask you about your coaching, because you do offer coaching work as well, through all your experience and the working with the trauma. I don't know. Let me get your opinion before. Do we ever totally heal from trauma, or do we just find a way to accept and navigate life and maybe frame it differently?
I don't know that. That is a great question, because I told you I was doing good.
Yeah.
I finally started my healing journey with my mom 10 years after she died. Thought I was great until all this stuff just happened recently and it brought up so much stuff. So then I'm like, okay, well, there's more healing to be done. And then the question became, is it acceptance? Do I still need to keep accepting this stuff? I feel like people would say that, yes, you can heal from it. I feel like each new experience might possibly trigger something, not even necessarily trigger, but it might bring up something that you thought you were healed from, but then you're not. So that I will say there's always work that could be done.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and I think our brain, I mean, you had so much go on for you that, like the age that your mom passed, your brain hadn't even reached maturation. And so as it, you give yourself 10 years. When I hear that, and it's like, ooh, took me 10 years was, I know for me, a lot of the trauma, there was new trauma introduced. So I never even got to deal with the old trauma, let alone the new stuff. So by the time I got, free and clear headed, I didn't even start working sobriety till I was 40, so I never got to deal with it. Parts of my brain and this stuff was very young still. And for me, I try to equate and take any of that back to purpose. Am I taking that and being of service to others, which I'm going to commend you because you are. And so maybe throw that in your head when it's there, that sharing your story and being there for others as you are, it lifts that burden. It lightens that weight.
Yeah. And you make such a great point about the traumas, because I did not know these words truthfully until 2020, when like I really started asking myself, what is going on with me? Why am I sad? Where is this coming from? And then I learned so much so quickly, between having mental health experts on my podcast to doing my own work. Yeah, like you said, I had trauma at the age of 25 of losing my mom, but then I still have childhood trauma from my dad. And it's like, which one am I dealing with, healing from? Which one am I going to attack first? Yeah, there's a song. I don't know if you know who Trevor Hall is, but he's like folk singer, but he literally has a song and he's constantly saying the work is never done. And I took that as like the healing work is never done.
Sure.
Because you might think you're healed, and people might be saying, no, but I really am healed. And I'm not saying you're not, but I have found that I'm like, I'm good. And then enter experience, something happens. And then I'm like, oh shit, now I have to, I don't want to say redo it, but I have to process this all again and figure out which tools I'm going to use for this thing that happened and came up. And yeah.
And I think that's part of it. New tools. I don't know about you. It could be a little thick-headed, and I don't always listen. Sometimes people have to be a little bit, I don't know if sensitive is the right word, but I'm receptive of certain types of talk, and communication to me. Others, you can shut me down really quick. Like if it's a tit for tat, or it's clearly a situation of keeping score quickly, like I did this for you, and how could you, it's like I'm out right away. And you put me down, oh, forget it. At that point, I am totally out. You've lost me.
Yeah. That's definitely interesting. Well, sometimes in terms of conversations and where I shut down, my boyfriend is such a positive person, does not suffer from victim mentality, where sometimes I can get in my head a lot more, and sometimes his conversations are not helpful, because he'll just say,
because you want to wallow, don't you?
Yes.
Hey, welcome to the club.
I know. And I'm like, but that's not right. I don't need to sit here and feel sorry for myself, but how the F do I pull myself out of it? So sometimes when he says those things like, don't cry, I'm like, that's not fucking productive. That's not helping me.
Yeah. Well, but I think there's certain things too. I hate the term, or I guess it's not a term, but when people say things like "just get over it," "don't cry," or "you don't need to cry," any of those things, it's like, no, you don't just get over it. You
Right.
learn to incorporate it and let it make you a more complete whole person. And especially for men, I came from the put some dirt on it. It's like, no, I've worked really hard to try to be a vulnerable man in
Right.
the right settings, of course, and show my emotions in a healthy way. So yeah, don't ever tell me that, and don't ever tell me just get over it, because no, you just don't get over it. It's like, if let's process this stuff.
Right.
Let's see where we're at. Let's step out of that victim mentality. Life is not something that happens to you. Not anymore. You're an adult now. There is a
Yeah.
difference. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's talk your work. Let's talk your coaching work.
Let's do it. So I basically call myself a self-love coach.
Mhm.
Because that's where I feel like I've struggled with the most is like self-worth issues. Um, and I really try to just help people with things that I have definitely have reconciled in the past like 2 years. And everything that I've learned, because I feel like there's some people that are still in stages that they might not even realize why self issues are happening, where self worth issues, and it doesn't just have to be self worth. It can be, lacking confidence, and I really want to help people with that. My biggest thing that makes me sad is people not feeling good enough, because I told you somebody put that there. And I want to help people figure out why and what we can do to get you feeling better. So that's what I call myself, a self-love coach.
I love it. And you're right. It just, the more experts I talk to, so many that voice, that negative voice, it's never in my own voice, like you said.
Yeah.
Never.
Mm-mm.
But it makes it hard to sit there and look in the mirror and go, I love you. You're good enough. You're worthy just the way you are, because as a kid, I wanted to be like Hulk Hogan big and, like this guy. And I'm just this tall, twiggy dude. And it's what I am. And it doesn't mean I'm any less worthy of love. I'm not going to
Right.
headline WrestleMania. Oh, well, but that's life.
You never know. Maybe they'll come out with a different type of wrestling.
It's changed. You can get smaller guys now, but I could pull it off, rip off the shirt. Let's go, brother.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Well, before we get to random questions and I leave you with the final thought, Melissa, if people want to find out more about it, you get a hold of you, inquire about the coaching, the podcast, all the awesome work you're doing, how can they do so?
Yeah, they can find everything at the brightsideoflifepodcast.com. Everything's there. Socials, you just scroll all the way to the bottom. That's all there. So it's a nice one little pretty bow at that website.
Yeah. And it's a wonderful website, folks, too. It's very easy to navigate, which I was going through it all. I'm like, I can find whatever I want to know. It's great here.
Good.
Do you ever look back and go, wow, I had the perfect last name to do this, man. There was a plan for me early on.
Yes. Yes. I'm like, branding is on point. It's perfect.
All right. What does your daughter think of the work that you do?
She likes it. I think she's really proud of me. She's grown up with me and she's had to see me, go through my own stuff with like missing my mom and everything. So I definitely think she's proud of me. But just like with my mom, is she probably won't understand the impact, not impact, but like it'll hit her later in life, like, oh, she's very like mental health realm, like
Sure.
Definitely. But she's kind of in her own little world too. So I think she'll realize later, like, oh, this is what mom was doing. Okay.
Yeah. Of course, she's 20.
Right. Exactly.
When
Exactly.
we're not in our own world, right?
Yep. Exactly.
That segue out is hard. I know.
Right.
Goodness. All right, let's have some fun random questions for you. What's the last song you listened to?
Oh God. It had to be Kings of Leon. I don't even know. It's a newer song. I was just listening to my Google, my Siri, my speaker.
Right on. I love Kings of Leon.
I love
Great,
Kings of Leon so
great
much.
band. And we all
Yes.
got to admit, the first time we heard Sex on Fire, we're like, oh, that's a great fucking song.
It's such a great song.
It is. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Ooh, I'm flying.
Are you? Why?
Because I want to like see everything down here. Down on, yeah, go up on mountains. I guess that's a shitty superpower. It probably could have been more.
No, it isn't. There's nothing about it. I mean, Jesus, with the way TSA and air travel is domestically right now. I mean, come on.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
you figure if you can fly, you have the strength to strap all your luggage to your back too, and just
2 people.
right. Let's see. You want to go to Bora Bora? Let's go.
Exactly.
If you could travel anywhere in time, but you had to stay there, when would it be? Where would it be, and why?
I have said this forever, even though I don't smoke weed, but I'm like going back to Woodstock. Was it 69?
I believe so.
Whatever. That just seemed like such a great time. I know it wasn't probably, but it seemed like a lot of fun. Maybe I would have done more drugs back then.
I'm afraid if I was at it, I always tell people, as a big fan of like 80s rock, primarily Motley Crue, Metallica,
Yeah.
stuff like that. I'm afraid if I lived at that time and was on the Sunset Strip, I wouldn't be here. There's no way.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think my life would have turned out the same way, but it seemed like it was fun. Like, just like you, music has been such a huge influence. So I'm like, that just seems like a great time.
What is something that people might be surprised to learn about you? Maybe something you don't share on the podcast or through your work?
I swear somebody has asked me this before and I thought of it later. Let's say that, well, I used to want to be a songwriter
Really?
because I wrote a lot of poems. So I'm like, maybe I can turn that into doing songwriting. I did not do that. But before anything, like I was obsessed with music. I don't know why I didn't go to school for music.
Sure.
I was like, maybe I can work at Pandora. This is like when Pandora came out. And I was like trying to figure out whatever I could do with music. That's what people don't know about me.
That's cool. I love it. Do you have any particular genres that you like, or are you pretty open to?
Dude, I love everything. I will go from gangster rap to country to alternative. I mean, all of it.
Same. That's when when someone tells you I'm a music lover, and then you ask them their taste, and it's just this singular genre. It's like, no, you like what you like. That's not
exactly
music loving. It's like, but if somebody goes, oh yeah, I went from Chopin to Snoop Dogg to Metallica to Prince or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, you are a lover of music.
Right, exactly.
We produced the Bright Side of Life movie. Who's playing you?
Oh my God. Like an actress now?
Mm-hmm. Any actress, anytime.
This is a hard one. Okay, let's say Jennifer Garner.
All right.
I don't know why, but I love her.
I could see it.
Her or Katherine Heigl.
Oh, Katherine Heigl would be great.
Yeah. I like her.
I love it. Yeah, so do I. Last one here before I leave you with the final thoughts. What do you think is your greatest achievement?
Starting my podcast.
Yeah.
And helping people.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Besides having my daughter. See, damn. Then you immediately regret. You're like, shit. Recent achievement.
Well, I would commend you and give you some kudos, not just having your daughter, being a single mom at 16, but raising a good person. I think that's a real sign of the work put in.
Yeah. And she is a great freaking kid. Thank you, baby Jesus. Thank you, baby Jesus.
I like to picture my Jesus in a tuxedo t-shirt.
Yeah, I'm just whatever one. I'm grateful.
Melissa, I like to leave the guests with the final thoughts. They're just through your experience that you can lend to the listener that perspective about life, struggles, whatever it is.
Yeah. So I really think to encompass this whole episode is I think we're all just we are just all going through life, trying to figure it out, learning, coping, learning some more, figuring out different strategies, how to enjoy life, how to have a balanced life. We're all in this together. And so we shouldn't feel alone, even though we feel like we're the only person out on this planet going through something. We're really not. And so hopefully through our conversations, you're like, oh shit, yeah, that sounds like me. Now you know you're not alone.
This podcast contains the views and opinions of the Knockin Doorz Down hosts and their guests to the show. The content here should not be taken as medical advice. The content here is for informational purposes only. And because each person is sharing their unique perspective, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. Views and opinions expressed in the podcast and website are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate, we welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. Privacy is of the utmost importance to us. For those wishing anonymity, people, places, and scenarios mentioned in the podcast have been changed to protect confidentiality at the request of certain guests. This website or podcast should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis for expert witness testimony. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or website. In no way does listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content establish a doctor-patient relationship. If you find any errors in any of the content of this podcast or blogs, please send a message through the contact page. This podcast is owned by KDD Media Company.